Okay, so in the last video we discussed an overview for our eye controls. In this video I'd like to begin the creation process of those eye controls. We're actually going to get everything except for matching between our attached and detached controls in place. So let's jump over into Houdini, and I want to start out creating a null that will be positioned at the pivot point of our eye and will act later on as our aimer. It will aim at our eye controls. So I'm going to create a new null. I'm going to do that up towards the top of our network. So I'll just give Houdini a second to bring up the tab menu. I'm going to create a new null, and I'm going to name that to L_I aimer. And I want to position this in the pivot point for our left eye. So let's grab that null, move it up to the eye. So we want to be centered in Y. Let's move that back in Z, jump into the front view with space 3, offset that out in X. So something like that. Let's take a look at that in the perspective view. That to me looks like that is indeed in the pivot point for the eye. We can copy this node, Control-C, Control-V. I'll rename that to R_I aimer, and to get that positioned all I need to do is negate the translate in X since we are in world space, and that will position that for the right eye aimer. We can now create two children of these nulls, one for each, and that means that we'll now have our eye controls such that they are positioned relative to each other in the same way as our aimers. That allows us to offset those controls out towards the front of the head, and in their default position have no effect on these aimers. So I'm going to create a child of our left eye aimer, and I'm going to name this to L_I control. And we know we're going to have both a head control parent and a master control parent. So let's set these up for our head control. So I'm going to say head control parent. I'm going to copy and paste that, wire that into our R_I aimer, and rename that to R_I control head control parent. If I grab both of these guys, we can start setting up some of the properties of them. I want to give them a blue node color since we're dealing with control objects, a yellow wireframe color since we're on the center of our character and these are our attached controls. I want these controls to have a control type of circles, an orientation of the XY plane. I'm happy with their size, but I do want to obviously offset them out in front of our head, something like so. So now that we have these positioned, we can make sure that we keep position when parenting and unparent them from those aimer nulls. We only had them parented to the aimer nulls so we could offset in Z and keep the relationship between them except for that Z translation the same. So I'm now going to move away from our aimers because we don't need to be working with those for a while. And I need to create a middle control, that master control for our eye controls. And before I do that, I know later on that I'm going to be matching my detach to my attach and my attach to my detach. And in terms of the master control for that, I'm actually going to need to work with editable nodes again. That means I want to have a null that acts as the initial position to make it easier for me to create another node that exists in the same space as our control object. So I'm going to create a duplicate of one of these nodes because we know for a center position between these two they are the same in terms of Y and Z. The only difference they have is in X. If we zero their X coordinate, it will be centered. So I'm going to create a duplicate of one of these guys. Let's get rid of that node color. I'm going to rename this to eyes_head, so eyes_head control parent. And let's match what we were doing earlier. So head control parent underscore initial pos. And let's zero out the translation in X to put us in the center. Now we can turn off our visibility and selectability there. And I want to make sure that this is parented into our head control. Well, the result of our head control. So I'm actually going to parent that in to the head bone so that if we pull the head control too far up from our neck, our eye controls actually stay in position and that won't affect the orientation of the eyes. It's going to be related to the head bone rather than the head control. So let's take this and whilst keeping position when parenting, parent this in to our head bone. And that now means that we have that nice initial position for our eye controls when dealing with our head bone. I can then wire a null off of this to act as our control. So I'm going to give this a blue node color. I'm going to name this to eyes control underscore head control parent. I want to give it a yellow wireframe color, and I need a control type of box. There we go, that works nicely. And I want to, on this case, on this node, lock everything from scales downwards, so scales, pivots, and uniform scale. I want to allow translations of this control. I also want to allow rotations, because that can allow us some very interesting things in terms of if we were to rotate this control around its z-axis with the other controls children of them, that would cause the eyes to do things like crisscrossing and going boss-eyed and the like. So it can be very interesting to allow rotation of that control. And in terms of our master control parent, it could well be essential to allow rotation of that control so that we can make sure that we stay oriented correctly for our head. So we have that control in place. I'm going to grab our left and right eye controls, keep in position when parenting, parent them into that control object. Now that they're parented in, we can clean their transforms because we know this is their default location. And those objects do not need to rotate. All they need to do is translate, and they only need to translate on X and Y. They don't need to translate on Z. So I'm going to lock their translate Z. So let's lock translate Z for both of these. I am going to select both of these together for the others. Lock their rotates, lock their scales, lock their pivots, and finally lock their uniform scales, so they can only be translated on X and Y. I do want to create that editable node, the editable node that exists in the same space as the eyes control, head control parent. We know we don't have a pre-transform, so I can simply wire a new null off of our eyes, head control parent initial position, and I can rename this null to our eyes control underscore head control parent underscore editable. Turn off its visibility, turn off its selectability. So we have the nodes that we need for our head control parent version of the eyes controls. Let's grab all 5 of those nodes, Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste a duplicate of those nodes, and these are going to become our master control parent nodes. So I do want to go ahead, and I will move this over to this side just to keep things a little bit more symmetrical, and I will rename these from head control to master control in each case. So head control becomes master control, and again here head control parent becomes master control parent, and here head control parent master control parent, and again master control parent. Now we do need to give these an orange wireframe color, going with our convention of our detached controls having an orange wireframe color. I also want to reparent that initial position into our master control. Of course we are keeping position when parenting, so that's not going to affect the position or orientation of those controls. So we have that all parented in now. So now that we have the 2 sets of controls, let's deal with blending between them. So I'm going to right click on the output of our left eye control head control parent and wire that into a blend. Then take our left eye control master control parent, wire that into the blend as well, and let's name this to L underscore I blend, turning off selectability and visibility. We can then repeat that for our right, so I'm going to right click on the output of that, the R underscore I control head control parent, wire that into a blend, rename to R underscore I blend, take our I control master control parent for the right, wire that into a blend, no visibility, no selectability. Now, just for keeping things nice and clear, we can go ahead and create a null as a child of each of these. So I'm going to name this to our L underscore I aim target, Control C, Control V, wire that into the right, name that to R underscore I aim target. And this is just so that we can specify these nulls on our pivot nodes as opposed to specifying the blends. It just keeps things a little bit more clear as to what is going on there. So we can jump down to our aimers, and now we have the ability to specify each of those aim targets on these guys. So we're going to look at, on the left eye aimer, I want to look at the left eye aim target, And on the right eye aimer, I want to look at the right eye aim target. And that now means if we come in here, and you can see as we start moving these controls, currently we're blending 50-50 with deal. We're actually blending back and forth between these and setting up matching in the next video, but we can see that we are aiming, and we're aiming 50-50 based on these controls. So indeed that is working fantastically, and of course we could come in and work with just one eye on its own. So we've got our two aimers in place. Now, to keep things nice and clear in the view, so we kind of have a graphical representation of some eyes that we can see when we're modifying our rig, instead of just having these nulls that are default null shaped, I'm going to create children of these eye aimers, and these are going to be called the eye pivots, and they're simply going to act as a graphical representation for us. So I'm going to create a child of the left eye aimer. Let's create a new null. I'm going to rename this to L underscore eye pivot. I'll create a child of the right eye aimer. I'll name this to L underscore, or rather R underscore eye pivot. Let's turn off selectability of both of those. Let's turn off selectability and visibility of both of the aimers. And both of these pivots, if we grab them, I want to go ahead and I'm going to leave them with a green wireframe color. I do want to give them a control type of circles. I want to boost their geoscale up slightly. Something around there will work out fantastically. And I also want to make sure that this will follow along with our head. That means both of these aimers, if we keep position when parenting, I'm going to parent them into our head bone. So if I parent those into our head bone, that now means we can move these on down here. Grab the pivots as well, just to keep things a little bit more organized. That means we could come in here and grab our head control. There we go, grab our head control. If we move our head control, you can see that indeed they are aiming. One set of controls is moving with the head control, one set isn't, but those eyes are indeed following along with the bone for our head, which means that we wouldn't be able to somehow pull the eyes out of their sockets. And we can see that we now have a nice graphical representation of eyes as opposed to those small nulls sat in the center. So that is going to work out fantastically for us. So that's everything that we need for setting up our eyes, except for their blending and their matching. And again, we'll deal with that in the next video. So this is actually going to conclude this video. Thanks a lot, everyone.